So then we'll get into kind of the online resources of these libraries that I've talked about, because realizing that not everybody can get to Bellefonte or Washington, D.C. to do research in person. This is the Philatelic Union Catalog, which serves as the catalog for the APRL, as well as, I believe, about 10 or 11 other philatelic libraries at this point. Most of them in the U.S. We also have the Green Foundation in Toronto and the Royal Philatelic Society of London, obviously in London, that participate in this. And all of these libraries now participate in an even larger union catalog, which is the Global Philatelic Library, which has philatelic libraries all over the world. It's a relatively new project within the last couple of years, and that is growing. Now, finding something in here doesn't necessarily mean that you can get your hands on it right away. If it's at the APRL, unless it's in our rare book collection, and you're an APS or APRL member, you can borrow it through the mail, you can request photocopies, you can request scans. We're pretty accessible. Not all of the libraries are as open, and that's not necessarily because they're trying to restrict information. It's because, at the APRL, we're open 5 days a week. We have a staff of 4 full-time equivalents ready to help members and researchers. Not all of these libraries have that. Even the Smithsonian National Postal Museum, they do not have a librarian there 40 hours a week. Their librarian works at the National Postal Museum and also at another Smithsonian library. The Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library in Denver is completely volunteer run. So they do provide a lot of services and they have membership, but most of these libraries are not able to be quite as readily accessible as we are. Most of them are willing to accommodate researchers on site, and some of them do have book loan and scanning and photocopy services. But this is your resource for finding philatelic materials in libraries in the U.S., and then the Global Philatelic Library is your resource for finding philatelic materials in philatelic libraries worldwide. This also contains an article index, which again is mostly produced by volunteers. So it's not comprehensive for all of the journal literature, but it's a really good start for finding journal articles. And we started recruiting more volunteer indexers to help us make that index a little bit more complete. Right now it has over 180,000 article entries. And we'll get into a little bit more about how the catalog works in a little bit. This is the catalog for the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. This is one of the few major philatelic libraries in the U.S. that's not yet in the Union catalog. And that's not because they don't want to participate, it's because we're still working with them on the technical details of getting their data into the Philatelic Union catalog. Their data, because they're part of the Smithsonian, is more complex than most of the other smaller philatelic libraries, so it's just taking us a little bit more time. But their catalog is available on the web, and so you can search and see what they have in the library.
So what kinds of things do they have? Just boxed out.
Well, books and journals. There is significant overlap between the philatelic libraries. If you go to the Union catalog, you'll see we have links for each of the participating libraries. If you click on these, it will take you to a page with some information about the library, about their lending policies, where they're located, what their hours are, whether you need to make an appointment. And it also gives some description about what their strengths are. So for example, the Northwest Philatelic Library in Portland has a very strong airmail collection. They're a fairly small library otherwise. It's a good library, a good regional library, but airmail is their real strength. The National Postal Museum, probably I don't know their collections inside and out all that well. Probably the biggest thing they have is the files of the Third Assistant Postmaster General on U.S. stamp design. The Postal History Foundation in Tucson has a good Western history collection, as does the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library.
Does Dallas have a library, Rich?
Yes. University of Texas Dallas has the Weinberg Philatelic Research Library, which is also not in the Union catalog for similar reasons as the Smithsonian, but because they're part of a larger system, it would take a lot to make that happen. I don't think it's really a priority for them. So we haven't been able to make that happen, but I did make a trip down there and visit the library. And I know that their local stamp club has meetings there. I think the American First Day Cover Society has meetings there. So it is, you know, a decently well-used collection. Has anybody ever used WorldCat? A few people? Okay. So what WorldCat is another union catalog, but this is not just philatelic libraries. This is all kinds of libraries, primarily in the U.S., but it does have some significant research libraries overseas. The National Library in Paris, the British Library. I know there's some Australian libraries in there, probably some other European libraries. But just because you're looking for philatelic information doesn't mean you need to limit yourself to philatelic libraries. That's often a good place to start because that's what we specialize in, that's what we know. But a lot of items of philatelic interest can be found in other library collections. So it may be that you can find a copy of a book at a library closer to you than one of the philatelic libraries. And there are also times when your philatelic research is going to go beyond strictly philatelic resources. So at the APRL, we limit our collections. You know, there are lots of things, say, on the history of railroads or maritime history or military history that would be, you know, really of interest to philatelists, but we have to draw a line somewhere because if we collected everything of interest to philatelists, because you all are interested in so much and you do so much research, we would probably need, you know, 6 or 12 American philatelic research libraries. So we have to draw a line somewhere, but a lot of these non-philatelic things are available in libraries, and you may find one close to you or be able to obtain material through interlibrary loan. There are also online resources that you'll find in WorldCat. And actually, starting recently, you will find APRL items listed in WorldCat because we started participating in WorldCat and contributing our records. One of the reasons we're doing that is that once records are in WorldCat, they show up in Google search results, which is something that we're not able to do with our current library catalog software. But records from WorldCat will show up in Google search results and other search engines, which makes things a lot more visible. And our other goal is to make them more visible to other libraries so that when libraries are helping researchers who are working on something philatelic or postal related, they'll be able to find our resources and come to us. And then when you go beyond library catalogs, of course, there are a lot of other resources available online that will be helpful. Google, I think pretty much everyone is familiar with. You know, I've been using it here from the show with my phone to look things up. So Google is not going to find everything. It's obviously not specialized in any way. But sometimes you can find really good information there. You do need to be careful when you're finding things to look at, you know, who produced this website, what kind of bias do they have, what kind of expertise do they have, do they even identify themselves, is it an anonymous site? So those are the kinds of things you want to think about, but I wouldn't discount things that you just find online. I'm often able to answer questions by doing a search in Google. Sometimes somebody's asking about a marking, and based on the words in the postal marking that they're asking about, I'm able to do a search and find an example of it. Sometimes a picture of a cover on an auction site or eBay, or even in the library collection sometimes. So it can be really useful. There are also a lot of more specialized sites that you may find useful. The Hottie Trust, is anyone familiar with that? How about Google Books? Anyone familiar with Google Books? It's a big scanning project. They're going into major research libraries, Harvard, University of Michigan, Penn State, scanning lots of books. Some of them you can only get snippets online, but some of them you can actually get the whole book. The problem I've discovered is that they're not using the descriptive data about the books from the libraries. They're using their own or automating it, or I don't know what they're doing, but it's not all that great. So sometimes the title that you come up with in Google Books doesn't quite match the document, especially when you're looking at post office department documents and government documents that get a little complex. Sometimes have some interesting binding arrangements. So Hottie Trust has a lot of the material from most research libraries that's in Google Books, but they actually use the library's descriptive data. So it can be a lot easier to find specific items in the Hottie Trust. And actually, let me see if I can get online here and actually show you the Hottie Trust. Okay, so you can do a search in here. But we also have collections that you can browse. So we have a collection called Philatelic Literature, which Larry Nix and I have been working on. And this is anything that we find on this Hottie Trust site that we think would be of interest for philately. If I scroll down, you can kind of see the kinds of things we're finding. An early volume of the American Philatelist from 1914-1915, annual report of the Postmaster General from 1875. Everything that you find on here is either going to be a government document, which is in the public domain, or something published before 1923, which is in the public domain. So you're not going to find, recent philatelic publications in here. It's going to be older stuff, but it's a really good site, especially for finding government documents and some of the major journals that ended up in major research libraries. So this is a work in progress. We have, I think, 50-some items on here so far, and Larry and I are working to continue updating this as we find things.
Well, this is all U.S. government.
No, not strictly U.S. government, but it's
Norwegian government on there.
I would guess not. It's from U.S. libraries, so it's not that it's restricted to U.S., but it's material that would have been in those U.S. library collections. So there will be a U.S. bias here, but that's not to say that there isn't something here.
So how would he, for instance, on your search for that, go back to the home page and type in Norwegian documents or something, or? Quite a bit.
Although, the way I did, let's see. Yeah. I think it probably mentions mail to Norway somewhere in here because I did a full text search. Let me try a little bit more restrictive search.
First one is postal routes and county maps.
You got 6 cents.
Now you'll see down here under viewability, it says limited search only. That means you can search within the full text of this publication, but you're not going to be able to download a PDF of the whole publication. And that's because it's 1931, so it's after that 1923 cutoff date. But you can see there is some non-US. It's just because it's US libraries, that's going to be a stronger part of the collection.
What's the significance of 1923? Is that like copyright?
Yes, anything published before 1923 under US law is automatically in the public domain. There are plenty of things published after 1923 which are also in the public domain, but after 1923 you have to kind of go through a formula and say, okay, was it published with a copyright notice? It was published with a copyright notice before 1978, wasn't renewed, and it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's very clear cut before 1923, definitely public domain.
So is that
After
like
1923, it depends.
Is that like a rolling 90-year?
No.
It's just 1923.
Yep.
Through 90.
Yep, so anything published after 1923, you have to do a little bit more work to figure out if it's in the public domain or if it's still under copyright.
Then that's what Google's running into on their Google Books thing.
That they're using that 1923, and Google
Well,
Google
they're-
is more restrictive than Hottie Trust because Hottie Trust will look at, is this a U.S. government document which is in the public domain because it can't be copyrighted, or is it something that was privately published that could be under copyright? Google does not distinguish; they just use that 1923 date. This site does look at the government documents. Any other questions on Hottie Trust over here? Okay. I do have a laptop with me. I'm at the Campaign for Philatelic booth next to the APS booth. So if you have questions after this, stop by and I can demonstrate things for you there. Actually, let me show you some of these sites rather than just showing you a slide. Yeah, maybe oops. No?
They have been blocking some sites, I've noticed, or some services.
No, I wonder why they would block something from the Smithsonian. That's strange. Well, anyway, just back in presentation mode. This site up here at the top, Arago, this is from the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. I see some nodding, so I think some of you have used this site. This is a really nice site. It's got a philately side and a postal operations side, and it's a way for the Smithsonian to show their artifacts. But you start very broad. You can also search, but you can start broad and then you kind of drill down. So in philately, you can start broad and then you go into different series of stamp issues, different types of stamps. And on the postal operations side, it's similar. You start, broad postal operations, and then you can drill down into more specific parts, and it will show you objects and have a description of the object.
Do you have the full website or the URL for that?
Yes, it's arago, ARAGO, .si.org.
ARAGO. Dot what?
SI for Smithsonian Institution. .edu, I'm sorry.
ARAGO.
.si.edu.
If you just do a search
Or
for
do a
Arago.
search on
And yeah, if you just go to Google and search for Arago, it'll be the first thing that comes up. And then this down here at the bottom is just to show you that we do catalog some websites in the Philatelic catalog. We try to be fairly selective because you can't catalog the whole internet. It's just not going to happen. But when we find good sites that have philatelic information, we will enter them into the Philatelic catalog, and then there'll be links that you can click on.
All these are screened for malware and all that stuff.
Yeah, anything that we put in the Philatelic Union catalog is a site that we've looked at and we've decided.
It's trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean, just like with books, we can't vouch for everything in the book. We don't fact check every single page of every single book. But there is some selection criteria, so we've looked at it and said, this looks like a good site for research. It's up to you to really decide whether you trust the information or not. But these are all things that we've selected. There's nobody going in and putting in their own website. It's things that we've looked at and selected. So that's some of the online resources, but philately is not, no subject area really is completely online. So we still use a lot of paper indexes. We're working to get more and more things available online, but there are still some things that are only available in paper. So this is an index to the American Philatelist. This is volumes 1 through 100, which goes through 1986. There's an author index and a geographic index. There is not, unfortunately, a subject index. But for some of these years, this is actually, for now, our best way of finding those old American Philatelist articles. Hopefully, before too long, we will start getting more of the archive of the American Philatelist. We're working on scanning it and working on a system to make that available and fully searchable online. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we do have this paper index in the library. So if you're looking for something in the AP, you can't remember when it was published, or you want to see if it ever existed in the AP, call us in between the library and the editorial department and various indexes in various formats. We'll do our best to track down the article for you. This is another example of an index to a specific journal. So these are great if, for example, you know that something was published in auxiliary markings, or you have a hunch that it was published in auxiliary markings. And this, as you can see, actually has authors, articles, geographic index, subject index, index of bibliography. So this has more information than was in that AP index. The limitation of an index like this is it's only that specific journal. So if you want to see if anything was ever published in any journal, maybe it has to do with auxiliary markings, but it might have been published in LINS or the AP or some other journal or magazine, you would have to go through an index for each of those publications. And for example, for LINS, there isn't an index, at least not that I'm aware of. Anyone knows of one? So this is just showing you a little bit of what the index looks like. So it's just a basic index. You look at the subject, and then it'll give you citations to articles in the journal. This is an example of an index that goes beyond a single journal. So it's focused on one subject, in this case, Costa Rica, but it goes beyond one publication, so it's looking across a variety of publications for material on the subject. And I'm sure you can't read this because it's really tiny, but this is just to give you an idea of how much information there is in here. This is an example of a general index, and I apologize, this is kind of dark, it might be hard for you to see. This is the Piper file. This is not our card catalog. Our catalog is all online. We're not using cards to find books in the library. But this is an index that was made by E.D. Piper. And he indexed major philatelic publications from basically the beginning of philatelic literature through December of 1969, when he had to stop working because he died. This is how dedicated this guy was. It's a weird index. It's quirky, but in some cases it is our best access to those years of journal literature. We have a volunteer who was working on trying to digitize this, and then he had to kind of put that project on hold because we ended up hiring him for the library. He is actually a librarian, and he's our reference assistant now. But maybe if we give him some time off, he could get back to digitizing it. But this would be a huge job to digitize this, just because it's not something you can just scan it and do optical character recognition and have something useful. I mean, if you scanned it in and did OCR, you would have a jumble. It would be a mess. So, but this isn't an APRL, and we're happy to look things up for you. We can scan cards from here for you. This is an example of one of the cards looks like, so you can see why we can't just scan it in. Then it would take a little bit more work to make it usable. But he has his own subject headings, and then the names of articles, and then he has abbreviations for what journal they were in, and then he has his own notations and footnotes down here. And he was very meticulous. He has these little codes that showed that he went back and double-checked the citations. And we don't have anybody doing anything quite like this these days. And then this is an example of some of the article references in the Philatelic Union catalog. I'll show you in a little bit what the full records look like, but you can see you get the title, the author, and information about the journal where it appeared. Now these, when you click on these, it's not going to take you right to the article because not all of this stuff is available online. It's also not going to tell you whether this article exists in a particular library because periodical holdings by their nature are a little bit variable and hard to keep track of. So it's just too big a job to have one click and have it tell you, yes, this article definitely exists in the APRL or the Rocky Mountain Philatelic Library or wherever. So you would click on it, see what journal it's in, and then search the library to see whether we hold the journal for that year. Or you can pick up the phone or pick up your device and email us and just ask us, and we'll be happy to check on it for you. This is the Royal Philatelic Society of London. And I'm showing you this not necessarily for their library, which I understand is quite good. I haven't been able to get over to London and see it. But unless you were also able to get over to London, you're probably not going to be able to take advantage of their library holdings. But the reason I'm showing you this is that they also have some cumulative journal indexes that they've loaded into their catalog. So this is another good place to look for journal articles on a topic. And they also host the database for the Global Philatelic Library. So if you want to search the holdings of all of those libraries, you go to, I'll show you the Global Philatelic Library website. But for right now, the database is actually here. So when you go to the Global Philatelic Library website and you click to search, what you're actually going to click on to search is the Royal Philatelic Society of London. It seems a little strange, but that's just because they're hosting the database for now. This is another kind of index. This is a topical index on fakes and forgeries. So not topical in the sense of the ATA, but in terms of being on one topic about philately. This is a huge index that was compiled by Ted Tedesco. This was originally published in the PLR serially, so you would have had to have several issues of the Philatelic Literature Review to access this index. He had given us a printed copy that we had in the library that we would use to help people. He's actually spent several weeks at the APRL updating this, and he gave it to us in electronic format with permission to publish it on the APS website. And he and I are working on the last finishing touches, editing it, making sure that the links work, and the table of contents works and that kind of thing. Sometime later this spring, this should be up online. So you'll be able to browse it using the table of contents, so you can look by country, or you can search, it's in PDF and you can search it. So if you're interested in literature on fakes and forgeries, this is the first resource that I usually go to for that topic. Another example of an index on a topic, this is Riley's Fiscal Philatelic Literature Handbook. It's a little bit older, it's from 1997, but it's still something that's useful. And this will have both book and journal literature. And this slide is here to remind me that it is available online in PDF format. So we don't just have links in the Union catalog to things that we've digitized. We also, if there's a book in our collection that's available online from a society website or somewhere else, we'll put a link in there so that you can find it online. And this is just an example of some of the, I realize you probably can't read that in the back, but some bibliographies on different topics that are in the APRL. So in addition to searching library catalogs for books and searching indexes for journal articles, bibliographies can be really good to give you an idea of what kinds of literature exist on a subject. So for example, an annotated bibliography on the Philatelic literature of Ireland. So if you're looking to, find out more about Irish philately, this might be a good place to start to see what kinds of publications are out there. We also publish a lot of bibliographies and indexes in the Philatelic Literature Review. This is an example. This is a bibliography on philatelic fiction. So this would be like murder mysteries that have a philatelic theme, children's books about carrying the mail or stamps, plays, novels. I can't remember if they included films or not, but anyway, literature that has, literature meaning fiction having a philatelic theme. And this is an example of a finding aid for an archival collection. So this is an example of one of ours for a collection of post office documents from the Aaronsburg, Pennsylvania Post Office. But there are lots of different libraries that have finding aids for archival collections. So archival meaning it's not a published book or journal or anything like that. In this case, it's a collection of documents. It could be a collection of somebody's personal papers. It could be a collection of photographs, covers, so anything that's not published. In most cases, these kinds of collections will be unique. And the finding aid basically gives you an overview of the collection and usually an inventory of either the boxes or folders in the collection. This one is actually very detailed and goes down to the item level. It was done by David Strake, and he actually lists the documents by their post office department form number. So that was very detailed. We were lucky to have somebody who was willing to do that much work. Most of the finding aids that we produce are created by volunteers with assistance from our staff.
Aaronsburg happens to be very close to the geographic center of Pennsylvania, and it was campaigning very seriously to be the capital of Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Aaronsburg won out because they had better transportation.
Yeah, Aaronsburg is just down the road from Bellefonte, where we're located. And it was a local member who brought this collection to us. But yeah, I did some, when I was working on this finding aid with David, I did some research on Aaronsburg, and a really interesting place. I don't think it ever got too much bigger than it was during the time period where these documents were collected. So
Notice when you drive through there, the streets are wide and much wider than they are in neighboring towns.
yes,
They were,
yeah,
it was part of their strategy.
yep. It is also alphabetically the first post office in Pennsylvania. And the photograph here of the post office and general store I got from the Penns Valley Historical Society in Aaronsburg. And this is an example of David's very detailed inventory. So he's got form numbers, the quantity, description, the dates, because a lot of these were ledgers and records that have a beginning and end date, and which box they're in. And some of these say Headsville Post Office because they're on display at the Headsville Post Office in the ABC. And this is an example of a finding aid from the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. This was prepared by Cheryl Gons. And you can see how the Postal Museum's finding aids are very detailed. And this has a pretty detailed inventory of this collection. This is produced not by the Postal Museum, but by the Postal Museum Library, by the Smithsonian Libraries. So they're not quite as detailed, but this is their finding aids for their library collections. And I believe this is where they actually now have, fairly recently this happened, they have the third assistant postmaster general files on here. Not the actual files, but descriptions of them, so you can see what's in those files. And then I think to use them, you would actually have to go, most archival collections, you need to actually physically go to the library to use them. If you know really specifically what you're looking for, sometimes you can get a scan or a photocopy of something, and we'll do that for our archival collections. But in most cases, the finding aid is kind of helping you determine whether it would be useful to travel to use the collection or how to request a scan of a specific item. So this is kind of to illustrate the difference between the Postal Museum Library's finding aids and the Postal Museum's finding aids, which were generally prepared by volunteers or curators and very detailed. And these are just basic descriptions of the collections. And this is an example from the National Archives, records of the Post Office Department. So this just gives you an idea of the kind of information that they make available about their collections. And this is an example. We talked about journal indexes. A lot of societies now are actually digitizing entire runs of their journals. And so sometimes those are available online, sometimes it's restricted to members, sometimes they're available. Some of them have very nice online searches. The Classic Society Journal, United States Stamp Society Journal, looking at you for examples. So some of them have very nice search capabilities online where you can retrieve individual articles. This is First Days, the Journal of the American First Day Cover Society, and that is available on it's a DVD or CD, but anyway, on a disc. So it's not out there on the web where you can search it, and it doesn't have its own search capability. But because the files are all in PDF, if they're all located on one disk, you can search across them all at once from the free Adobe Reader. If you go to advanced search, then you can search across files. So sometimes an index is better than a search. Sometimes a search is better than an index. The best of both worlds, what makes a librarian really happy is having both a good index prepared by somebody who knows what they're doing, as well as having a full text search. So that's our dream. Very few journals actually have both of those things together. Okay, and then I wanted to get into, look at my time, I lost my watch on this trip somehow. All right, we have about 20 minutes. So I would like to get into a little bit of searching the Philatelic Union Catalog. So this is our main search page. This is what you will find if you go to catalog.stamplibrary.org or go to the APRL website and click on Online Catalog. So would somebody like to give me something to search for?
S. Allen Taylor, fake Kansas.
Okay.
Allen Taylor.
And I'm leaving off the S because it's probably not really necessary, and searching on a single letter can be a little bit tricky. So I'm just going to put in this search, just like he said, and just click search and see what happens, and then we can massage it a little bit. Nothing. Any ideas why I got nothing? Yeah. Usually when you get 0 results, it can mean that there is nothing on your topic. In this case, I have my doubts that that's true. It can mean that you misspelled something, so it might mean that we spelled Allen wrong, or maybe we hit a wrong key when we put in cancels. So a misspelling is the first thing to look for when you get 0 results. The other thing to look for is, was your search too restrictive? Are you not using the same terminology, for example? So if a book or a journal talked about cancellations rather than cancels, this is not going to pick up material. Or hand stamps, or postal markings, or if it used forged instead of fake. So all of those things. So let's try.
Can you enter like asterisk for a wild card?
That's exactly what I was going to suggest.
Oh.
So I'm going to take out fake, because probably if we're finding S. Allen Taylor, chances are it's going to be about fakes or forgeries. So that's probably not a real necessary part of this search. So what I'm going to do is, as this gentleman suggested, put an asterisk after cancel. And that's a wildcard character. So this will now search for cancel, or the word cancel with any letter or number of letters after it. So it could be cancel, it could be cancels, it could be cancellation, cancellations, etc. And the order of words that we have in this search does not matter. This is going to find records that have each of these 3 words, but they can be anywhere in the record in any order. So one word could be in the title, one could be in the author, one could be in the subject. So we found 2 records here. 2 very different records. Actually, one is a clipping file on Paraguay, and one is an exhibit on Prince Edward Island, Philatelic. record. Not all of our records are this lengthy.
Are those all hot links?
These are all hot links, the subjects, so you can click on them. Not all of them are going to be terribly useful. For example, if we click on 19th century, it's going to bring up just a list of everything that has 19th century in the subject. So this one is more useful to let you know when you're looking at a record, this is about 19th century or 20th century. In this case, is both. So I would sort of question how useful that is. It's pretty broad. If you search on if you click on production, it's going to give you a list of everything to do with production. So I think unless you're looking at something specific, like clicking on Taylor, S. Allen might be useful because that would bring up everything with S. Allen Taylor as a subject. But this can give you good ideas of how to construct a further search using the subjects.
A lot of times when you enter words in a search, will return 500,000 records. How, are there symbols that you use between the words or something to narrow that, or do you have to have both words in the search results, and what is that? Is that a plus or a and?
That's actually a really good question. It's going to depend pretty significantly on what you're searching in. You know, are you searching in Google? Are you searching in our library catalog? Are you searching in WorldCat?
Well, talk about your catalog.
All of these are going to be different. So in our catalog, first let's get our record set beyond 2, and then so we'll broaden it, and then I'll show you how to get more specific. So I was doing the search on Allen to show you that this came up because it has S. Allen Taylor as a subject. Should have cancel in here somewhere. Yes, and it also has machine cancels as a subject. Well, it's not saying that, so my search is not saying that this has information about S. Allen Taylor machine cancels. It's saying that this Paraguay clipping file, which remember was multiple volumes, so this is pretty broad, has something about S. Allen Taylor and something about machine cancels, not necessarily related. It could have something in volume 10 about machine cancels and something in volume 2 about S. Allen Taylor. So, in all likelihood, this is probably not going to be your best resource, although I know you're doing a pretty intensive project, so there might be something of interest to you. What I'm going to do is go back and just search on S. Allen Taylor and see how much we come up with there. So doing a pretty narrow search did not seem to be particularly effective here, so let's try broadening it a little bit.
You're gonna get 100,000 hits.
Yep, and then we're going to show you how to narrow it.
Okay. I think you need the S.
So actually, we only get 54 records. It's not that huge. So you can see that we're getting a fair variety of things. The first one up here is obviously about S. Allen Taylor. Let's click on the second one and see what kinds of things we're getting. While this is thinking, just wanted to point out that all these book records have location codes. Those tell you because we did not limit our search to any particular library, you're going to get records from all of the libraries in the Union Catalog as well as articles. So when we go into refine the search, I'll show you how we can limit that. So this one has S. Allen Taylor as a subject, so that's why it came up in our search. It's British North American Fantasies, Philatelic Phantoms of Canada, Canada Logos.
I don't know.
So do we. So looking at the record, this full display is going to give you more information about the book, who wrote it, the call number, where it's located on our shelves, when it was published. And the brackets around 1973 here means that 1973 was not actually identified on the publication as itself as the date of publication, but our cataloger has somehow determined that that's the date it was published. Physical description, it'll tell you how many pages it has, so that'll give you an idea about the size of the book. And the notes here, it says it's photocopy format. We do have a lot of material in our collection that is photocopies, things that were produced in very limited quantities, or sometimes things that were only ever produced in photocopy format. And then down here at the bottom, it gives you item information, so you can see that we have 3 copies. If one of them were checked out, it would say on loan, and it would tell you where it was due back. But this is showing that we should have 3 copies on the shelf. And as I was saying, they all have a location code. So this one, you can see that the location is CCC, which is the Collectors Club of Chicago. But this looks like it's actually the same. So you will see multiple records for the same book if more than one library has it.
It should be, the first, it's saying 9th and 10th edition, but what about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Oh, the numbers down the left side?
No. Sherwood Springer, 10th edition, and then the next one is 9th edition. I guess the next one, item 7 might be 8th edition, but it's going to continue. Because there are 9 more.
Yes, this is organizing by title. So that's why they're appearing in the order that they are. They're not necessarily in order by the edition number.
Yep, there's the 7th edition and 8th edition.
Yeah, so obviously these are not coming out in order of edition. It's just based on the title.
These are very small.
Yeah, go ahead.
So let me show you now the advanced search. So this is the basic search. But you can limit a little bit more here. We can put in a record type. So that would be like book, journal, website. And you can click on About Record Types to learn more about the kinds of records that the various libraries use. You can also limit to a specific library. So if you just wanted to look for material in the APRL that you could actually check out, or if you were in London and you wanted to look and see what the Royal Philatelic Society of London has, you could choose that. In order to find journal articles, you need to select all libraries and indexes because the journal articles do not have a location code attached to them. The advanced search gives you a lot more control over your search. So you could search for items by a specific author. You can search in subject, which is usually a little bit more limiting than searching for a word in any field. You can search for a specific title. You do still have an any word search box. You can search by publication date, by language. If you're searching for English language, this is probably not going to work all that well because our catalogers don't always put English. That's kind of the default. So we try to, but not all of the libraries do it, not all of our article indexers do it. But if you're looking for something in, say, French, chances are this is going to be filled in, but it's not complete for English because we operate primarily in English, so that tends to be assumed. One thing I was questioning about here is this is not a form, it's not a registration form. You don't need to fill in every field. And in most cases, you're actually better off putting less in here because anything that you put in here, it's going to look for all of that information. So if you fill in all these fields, it's only going to return records that have everything you put in. You can use OR. So you'll see we have drop-down boxes. So you could do a word in the title or specific author. More often though, you would use and to combine these and use or within a field. So for example, if we wanted to search for fakes or forgeries, I've used wildcard characters here, so we would have fake or fakes, forger, forgeries, forgers, etc. And you'll notice I used a slash instead of an or. It tells you that over here, a lot of people miss this. It's just a quirk of our catalog that they use these symbols instead of words. So an ampersand means and, slash means or, question mark means not, wildcard character, the star is truncation, and a colon is rages. So rages would most likely be used in publication dates if you're looking for something published between 2002 and 2012. You're using colon. So fake or forger is going to come up with a lot. But we can combine, well, it's only going to be in the 30,000 range, I think, because we don't have many records in here yet.
So what do the parentheses do?
So the parentheses is combining that. So now I'm saying I want to search for fakes or forgeries, either one of those words, and cancels. This is still going to be a pretty big search, but let's see what happens.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So just follow the
Exactly. Yep. 575. So again, it's still a pretty broad search. We want to narrow this down a little bit. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving because there is another group in here at 3 o'clock. Where are we supposed to be? Get back to my presentation. That's where we are. I didn't skip it. Oh, I did want to point out that in the Philatelic Union Catalog, down at the bottom of the page, we have some search help for you. So obviously I wasn't able to tell you everything about the catalog here today, but there is about the Philatelic Union Catalog, more search help, which will be text help that you can read through. And we also have a video tutorial, and as we have time, we're planning to produce more of those. So these will be little, like 2 to 5 minute video clips you can watch that will show you how to do something in the catalog. You know, and it's a live demo, so you know it's a video. It'll actually take you through the search process, so you can actually see what I'm showing you. Contact the APRL. So we make this available so you can search yourself and you can use the cart to request material. But we are happy to answer any questions you have by phone, by email. You can write us a note, put a stamp on it, put it in the mail. We can answer it that way. And there's also information on how to request book loan scans and photocopies. This slide is just to give you an idea of the different kinds of material that we have in the library. It's not just books and journals, children's literature, newspapers, catalogs, philatelic fiction, government documents, archives, auction catalogs, exhibits. These are copies of exhibits, not actual exhibits, so you can check them out at the library. And we have a growing collection of online exhibits. And if you are an exhibitor here at the show, I'd encourage you to help us grow that collection by donating a scan or a photocopy of your exhibit. Show programs, pollers, price lists, new issue announcements, and more.
Do you have archives like with the ASBA magazine, or something like that, publication?
Yep,
You can read them all online?
no, not online. We have them in the library.
You have to check them out.
You can check them out, or you can, if you're looking for a specific article, we can do a scan or a photocopy. It'll depend on the title. ASDA, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
But you can check the book back of a specific magazine, they'll send it all.
Yes, or we can make a copy of an article for you.
Oh. Thank you.
Yep. So this is just to show you our scanning and copy service. I'm moving quickly because I know people are waiting. You can request things directly through the catalog. These requests all come to the APRL, so don't request material from London from us because we can't send it to you unless we also have a copy of that book. But journal articles or books at the APRL, you can request using this form. These are digital books that we have for sale at the APS booth. Most of the things that we're doing now we're putting online rather than CD and DVD. This is an example of one that we scanned and put online. This is a description of a microfilm resource, and we actually have a member scanned the microfilm for us, and we're working on getting the actual microfilm content online. And I just really quickly, before we leave, want to show you some of the work that we've been doing on the new library that we're renovating in Belfont in the Manage Factory. This is the architect's rendering of what it will look like when it's done. These are floor plans. I have folders with these floor plans in them so you can look at them more closely. This is the compact shelving that we installed this summer and moved material out of our old annex into this nice compact shelving.
Not inexpensive.
Not inexpensive. The system that we bought was used, so it was about a third of the price of what we would have paid.
Still a lot.
This is what the main public part of the library looks like today. Well, actually today, you can probably see some snow out these windows in Belfont. But this is what it looks like now. So you can see we're partway there, but we're still working on getting the rest of the way there. And this is some of the construction.
Estimated completion of the library?
Depends how big a check you'd like to write us.
You can have written. No set date.
I gave it to Barb to take back to the APS.